Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of the Becoming You Through Him series. I'm your host, Aaliyah J. Thomas. If you have not caught episode 1, make sure you go ahead and do so. Episode 1 was all about being able to recognize the call that God has over your life when you are in your season of becoming. Sometimes you don't know you're becoming until you are already in it. Okay? So, episode 2 today, the weight of the call is going to focus on, once you recognize that you are in the call, what does that weight look like? Okay. Nobody talks about, the weight of what it really means to be chosen. And that's what today's episode is going to consist of. Okay. So, if there are any moments from last week's episode to today's episode, go ahead and make sure you put that in the comments. Make sure that you'll follow me on all platforms. And yeah, let's jump right in. Okay. So, of course, I had to take some notes just to make sure that I'm hitting on all topics. Today, I do not have any tea. I have some water that I'm going to be sipping every now and again. My family just got over the flu, so I'm trying my best to make sure that I hydrate. Okay, so if you want to grab some tea and your journal, do so now. You don't know you're becoming until you're like in the middle of it. And like I said in the first episode, my becoming came in this stage of, compounded grief. The biggest thing that I was grieving was myself, my own self identity. I was grieving the ending of my relationship with my oldest child's her father, and just different dynamics of releasing parts of me that I no longer was, right? And that came with understanding that, where God was trying to take me, who I was at that moment, or who, like, different parts of me was not going to be able to come for the journey. And, God calls you before you're even ready. Like, I was not in a place at that time to be, I guess you could say chosen or called from what I thought. But once God calls you and you go on this journey of self-isolation, that journey is God preparing you for who you're called to be. Like, that whole journey is the indicator of, like, the trials and tribulations of, like, things you're gonna go to in order to make you where God is calling you to be. And that season is a season before the money, before the support, before the desires. Like, all of the things that will come later are not what you have in that season, and it's very strategic that way, right? I feel like I lost so much to get to where I'm at now, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So as you are in this, becoming series, I have two options for you just to kind of help you along in your own season. So if you're following me on Instagram at the Redefinition Strategist, I have a 25-day journey that you can take just to kind of help you refine your own becoming. There are going to be some things that you need to let go in order for you to let go and let God, right? So you have the option of going to follow me over on Instagram and hitting the highlight on my on my page that says becoming, and then go ahead and taking that journey in order to help you, process your own becoming. Okay. My devotional Becoming You Through Him is also another option. I go into more detail when it comes to a lot of the stories and journey that took me through my own becoming. So there are 4 parts to, I guess you could say, 4 sections in my devotional Becoming You Through Him. There's the birth of ambition, there is the college hustle, there is the becoming, and then walking boldly into the new. Okay, that goes pretty much over like my very start of like entrepreneurship and what that looked like for me at a very young age, and then basically up until the beginning of this year, having my baby after newly being married. Okay, so the season of isolation is what prepares you for, the becoming, right? So, the responsibility of the call is heavy. The weight of the call feels heavy because it is a sense of responsibility that comes with it. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about what realizing that was for me. Um, but this isolation period, so in your becoming, you are isolated. The isolation is pressure, right? You feel the pressure before you actually feel the sense of responsibility. And at that time of my life, I was like just starting to like go live in my business and like start to like get eyes on me. And I remember it being like very, very uncomfortable. And anything that is like that God is telling you to do, you're going to have a lot of restraint with it. Like is of God if you're like, yeah, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. Like, you just go back and forth with yourself. It's God telling you to do something. So, I was very reluctant, very nervous. And it's weird because I'm a talker. If I have to call someone, I'd rather pick up the phone and just call them. So for me to feel like intimidated just to get up and like turn my phone on and start talking was a little crazy. But I did it nervous. I did it scared. I did it not sure if my message was always landing, to who it was supposed to land to. And it's been 2 years, just 2.5 years of, doing live. And again, this is something that, I wouldn't necessarily say this is my ministry. Maybe it is, but it is 100% something that God is telling me to do. And the obedience is there, right? You have to lean into that obedience, whether you want to do it or not. Like, it's something that God is telling you to do. So, you're going to feel, again, the pressure that comes with the call while you're deep in your isolation phase. And you got to think about it, right? Like, how are diamonds are made? Diamonds are made under pressure. And a lot of people will say like, oh, I gave my life over to Christ, and everything started to go downhill from there. Well, it's a challenge. God is seeing how much he can trust you with, not even just, your own becoming, but can he trust you with more? If you're praying for more, God is going to give you challenges to be able to see if you can withstand more, right? So I was already, grieving myself, but I had to grieve so many different areas of my life in order for me to understand, like my own individual separation, right? And, people don't notice your change until after the fact, right? You could be going through it, you could be stressed out, you could be like really in the thick of it, and then it's not until like that very first time you come out when someone says, oh, like your demeanor is so different, it's just something about you. I just can't put my finger on it, right? And I was getting a lot of that in my season. And the hidden season is important because like I said in the first episode, Jesus was hidden, anonymous. Jesus' hidden years and yours. And his Jesus being hidden was his isolation period, where God himself put Jesus through all these different tests to see his character, right? His character was deemed at 30 years when we meet Jesus. He's 30 years old, and everybody was looking at him like, oh, that's just a carpenter's son. That's just a carpenter's son. So people didn't really know the responsibility and or the weight that Jesus carried, because they weren't with him when he was in his isolation period. They wasn't with him when, you know, God set him apart. So, you know, people were not aware of, you know, the gifts that was being developed, you know, within Jesus. So, you know, God has to, you know, work in private in order for things to be revealed in, you know, in the scene in the front of others. So that's a true testament to, you know, not even just my becoming, but Jesus is becoming as well. Jesus' trajectory in life. You know, he was set apart for 30 years. God, you know, instilled in him, allowed Jesus to perfect his gifts. And then we see him at 30 years, but God was doing all this preparation with Jesus. So, you know, again, like the weight of the call is, you know, don't think of it as a burden. If you are like, once you feel that weight, it can feel like a burden, 100%. But don't think about the weight of the call being a burden. Think of it as God trusting you, essentially with his flock. Okay? So if you feel stretched, unseen, you know, tired of, you know, your own becoming, the separation, the isolation, people not showing up for you as you may have want them to, just understand that you are carrying something that is extremely sacred and God is with you. Okay. I was reading Debate of Satan, and this is like when I had like I had two moments where I felt the weight of the call. Okay. Now I was reading the Beta Satan. This was about a year and a half ago when I was reading the Beta Satan, and I remember I don't remember I gotta look it up. I gotta look it up. But I remember I was reading a section in the Beta Satan, and it made me understand like God's character and the way that he genuinely loves me. And it took me by surprise because, you know, I mentioned in the first episode, my father passed away the same week I had my daughter. You know, we were not close. We didn't have a relationship pretty much at all. You know, my mom was a single mom, and you know, we look to God. We look to God. We look to Jesus. We look to him as, you know, as our Father, you know, in Christ. And there's so many different people. You know, the Beta Satan talks about, you know, not living your life in the season of defense. In offense. And you know, the Beta Satan talks about, you know, not living your life in a season of offense. And I had to read that because, you know, a lot of times we take things personally when we shouldn't take things personally. And, you know, I was reading this chapter in the Beta Satan, and it really just shifted my perspective on not taking things personally, and, you know, taking a step back and just being able to, you know, see things objectively in the lens of how God would want to see them. And a lot of times we, you know, our emotions get so wrapped up in things. We get so caught in the moment of, you know, what people are saying specifically, and not necessarily taking time to just take a step back and, you know, look at it from a different perspective. And, you know, I remember just being in a space where I was holding on to things, and it was not serving me at all. Like, it was not serving me for my sake or the other party's sake at all. So that was the first moment when, you know, I was able to not only see like God's true character and, you know, how he shows up for other people, but more importantly, like just him loving me. You know, like there were so many times I was like in desperate need of support, you know, being a single mom, you know, myself. And I didn't sign up to be a single mom. I don't think no one signs up to be a single mom, right? But when you're with a person, you're not equally yoked, and you're searching for Christ in like more ways than one, like that like that tear, like that separation of like not being equally yoked with a partner, or just people in general, because like I said, I was going through a lot of boundary issues with, my mom, my sister, some friends, because like I said, my relationships were on unsteady ground, to the point where like I allowed things that I shouldn't have allowed for years, like being a strong friend, being that one specific family member that everyone goes to. And when you're not equally yoked with your partner, or like people you consider to be like, in your corner, it makes you crave, just a closeness. And I had to like literally turn off like deep desires and deep things that I truly felt like I deserved at that time in my life, and just give that energy into God. I had to pour that energy into God, because if I didn't, I probably wouldn't be where I am today. And I'm reading this passage in the Bait of Satan, and I had this moment where I was like, God, I surrender, I give it all to you. Like, God, I surrender, I give it all to you. I cannot keep yearning for these people, like people that are empty, people that are not filled with the Holy Ghost and the Holy Spirit. And when you're craving this need of being filled, and the people around you are like half full or like practically empty, it's a feeling that just pushes you in the place of like the isolation gets even deeper. But it's not even just like a physical isolation, it's a spiritual and emotional isolation that you just can't seem to emotionally get a grasp of, like yourself. And that alone, again, it had me really pouring into Jesus. And and it's crazy to say, but like I feel like my relationship had, in that moment, was like the first time I realized that my relationship with God has been reciprocal. And I was like, whoa, because I feel like I'm fighting all the time for my relationships in my life to be reciprocal. And for the very first time in my life is when I felt like my relationship with Jesus was reciprocal. I had another moment, at maybe like 2 weeks after reading the Bait of Satan, where I think I was preparing for like a live event. And because I used to have like I used to do certain events for the year on Meetup. So I'm getting ready for an event that I was hosting, and I remember just getting so emotional, because I was like, whoa, like there's people out there that I have a responsibility for. And I was just thinking about like what that means to carry something so sacred, right? Like I said, like your becoming is God saying, I trust you. I trust you. Your isolation is God saying, okay, can I trust you with more? Right? And a lot of times that could feel like a burden, but you need to look at it as you are carrying something that is so sacred, and God trusts you to carry it. Right? And I remember I was sitting in my old apartment. And I think my husband was in the kitchen, and he was like, babe, why are you crying? And I was like, babe, like, I have this sense of responsibility that I have to help these people. I don't even know who these people are, but I have to help them. And when I tell you I was crying, I was like sobbing, like literally sobbing. And it wasn't until I was like writing out, the episode, and I was like, whoa, like, is this like a snippet of what Jesus felt when he died on the cross? Jesus. So yeah, and I'm going to like talk to my husband about it. He was like, yeah, baby, that's deep. But I truly felt like, I mean, I was sobbing. I was just like literally uncontrollably upset. And I was just like, wow, like, God, thank you for trusting me with your vision. because this, again, this I 100% love what I do, but when it comes to God putting me in this position, it could be a little intimidating. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like I'm just not, right? So just to be in a space to receive, God's vision. I can't thank you, Father. Just thank you. So again, I'm gonna give you guys some homework because again, um, God is telling me to give you this homework. So if you don't do it, you're not being obedient to who? Oh, okay. So your homework is gonna be, what did I lose and what was I being prepared for? You could journal that. What did I lose and what was I being prepared for? Then you're going to journal a moment you thought God abandoned you and reframe that situation as preparation. Okay? Um like I said, I lost a lot. I lost several relationships in my life at that time. And I lost a part of myself. The biggest thing that I lost was my voice. I lost my voice. That was the biggest thing. And I never forget the very first event that I hosted, like do meetup, like the whole um like that whole event, like I was very hoarse, very very hoarse. It's crazy. But yeah, this concludes episode 2, the weight of the call. In the next episode, we will be talking about the answer, the moment where you either surrender to the call or you resist it. Okay. Again, thank you guys for being here. This is the Becoming You Through Him series. I'm your host, Aaliyah J. Thomas. If you are, moved by the Spirit by any which way, go ahead and put it in the comments. I would love to know how God is moving in your life. And yeah, until next time, later.